Welcome to Module 3B, Writing Goals and Developing Outcomes. This module will cover identifying your project goals, writing measurable goals, identifying outcomes, and measuring your outcomes. This is important for the evaluation section of the proposal, where you need to describe how successful completion of your project will impact people with IDD and/or systems serving people with IDD. Get out your evaluation module worksheet and fill it out as we go through these slides. If you didn't already fill out the practices and outputs on the worksheet in Section A using Module 3A, you might want to consider doing that now. You can stop the presentation and fill out each section of the worksheet as it relates to your project. Using the worksheet, look at Section B, which focuses on outcomes. The first question asks you to identify your goals. We have two questions to help guide you through this process. First, what do you hope to change with this project? And second, how might this help people with intellectual and developmental disabilities or their families advocate for themselves? Take a few minutes to think broadly about the main goal of what you're trying to do with your project and write down your answers to these questions. It's important that your goal is clear and is something you can measure. Important part of the scoring process is how well the proposal clearly identifies measurable goals that link to the state plan. You can measure your goals by looking at things about your practice that you can see or count. This is an example of a goal for a program aiming to help students with IDD participate more in their IEP meetings or individual education plan meetings by developing their own IEP goals. You could measure if students attend their IEP meetings and also if the IEP team reports that at least one annual goal was chosen by the student. Remember to make the goals something you can measure, count, see very easily, and consider how much time it will take your staff to collect the measures. An outcome is something you measure to see if your practice or program worked well. To link it to the State Council, it's important to measure by participant outcomes, then to look at how the practice helped people with IDD and their families, and system outcomes, which might change how we do things in our city, region, state, or our organization. Look back at the worksheet you've been filling in and think about your outputs. For each output you listed, think about what change you want to measure for them. What changes you expect for individuals with IDD, their family members, people you are training, and those they help. Is there any system that you expect to change, including any agencies or programs who have staff participate in your practice? Outcomes should be based on your practice and how you expect the practice to make things better. For example, if you're training people with IDD to participate in their IEP, you might measure how many students attended their IEP after the training and ask them if they felt comfortable giving their opinion during the meeting. You should also find out how satisfied they are with your practice. Let's look more specifically at participant outcomes in Section B3 of the worksheet. If you have people participating in your program, you will need to have outcomes related to your participants. There are many different ways to measure participant outcomes. Some common outcomes include satisfaction with activities, improvement in skills, participation in advocacy activities, and participation in leadership positions. These are things that you could measure by having participants fill out a survey and calculating the percentage of participants who respond in a certain way. Let's take a look at some example survey questions. This is an example of a common way to measure satisfaction. This question has a 3-point scale with different degrees of satisfaction: very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and not satisfied at all. The person filling out the survey would pick the one that describes their feelings about the activity. The outcome would be the percent of people who say that they're very satisfied with the activity. This type of question could be included in a survey that asks other questions as well, such as about demographic information or about other participant outcomes. You could also interview people if reading a survey is hard for them. This example survey question aims to measure an increase in skills. This particular question is targeting advocacy skills and asks, do you feel like you are better able to say what you want because of this activity? You will notice that the question is very simple and asks about a specific behavior related to advocacy. There are several responses that the participant can select: yes, not sure, and no. The outcome would be the percent of people who answer yes. This question could be asked after a training related to increasing advocacy skills, and you could also include it in a survey that asks about other specific advocacy outcomes, such as participating in advocacy activities or other participant outcomes. Next, we'll talk about system outcomes. This is section B4 of the worksheet. If you're creating or improving a practice or trying to change any systems or rules, then you will have system outcomes. Some type of system outcomes include using a new practice, improving an existing practice, and starting or improving policies, procedures, statutes, or regulations. A common way of measuring these system outcomes is the number of things that are being implemented or improved. Some example system outcomes are a change in school policy to send an invitation letter and email to students to encourage participation in their IEP. Development of a toolkit that will be a new procedure and safety programs. Creation of a transition timeline that coordinates care across school and early intervention programs. Recommendation of a policy change to include IDD training for safety officers in their academy. Use the table in number B5 of the worksheet to help you organize your outcomes and ways of measuring them. What are the current outcomes that are important to show the success of your program? Think about how you'll measure your outcomes. Try to think about simple ways to measure the things you're trying to change by using this practice. The outcome measures will change depending on what you are doing. You may want to measure one outcome in several different ways. Here are some examples based on our IEP training. To know if students are using the skills learned in the IEP participation training, we could measure the number of IEP goals suggested by the student, the number of goals that the student suggested that the IEP team actually adopted, the number of trained students that attended their IEPs, or we could survey the students and ask them about their self-confidence. To know if people are satisfied with the program, we could use a satisfaction survey. This could allow people to rate satisfaction for the training as well as satisfaction with the outcomes. Students, teachers, and administrators could fill it out. Great! Now you've identified the outputs and outcomes for your project, as well as how to measure them. You can use the information in your worksheet to write this section of your grant proposal. In the next section, we're going to talk about how to link your outcomes to the SCDD performance measures and the state plan goals.